So obviously there's been a major shift. I went from essentially consuming carbs a day, and that was just from obviously just animal foods, to now upwards of 500 grams of carbs per day, 3,500 to 3,600 calories depending on the day. Before, I was doing a 1-to-1 ratio of protein to fat, which obviously had me consuming 250 grams of protein at 140 pounds body weight, which obviously was just unnecessary, or almost.
So 250 protein, 250 fat. The protein is very high, but then if he's so physically active, doing so much during the day, that's kind of warranted. But I mean, all the people that I work with that are this active, I'm talking about people that are like postmen, people that, have full-time jobs where they're doing manual labor. They're all on a much higher proportional ratio of fat to protein, regardless of how big they are. You have to fuel the work. You can't just match it 1-to-1. I mean, what's to say Tristyn wouldn't do a ratio of 1 gram of protein to 1.25 grams of fats, then even 1.5 grams of fats. That he could have just been having loads of gluconeogenesis, therefore not actually using protein specifically for what he needed to utilize it for.
That's actually what I was going to mention with the gluconeogenesis. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We've got to find where we are now. Let's go there.
Oh, well, is it actually beneficial to not have that soreness like the carnivores or many carnivore advocates?
That, let's say, rinsing of cortisol and, this sympathetic response that was always occurring. Maybe you lost, let's say, 4 pounds of body weight, but that was 6 pounds of water came off. And then intravascularly, you got 4 pounds of tissue, right? Or whatever it was. So I didn't want to slam you with carbohydrates. You experienced that, what we talked about yesterday, that 2 o'clock kind of crash where you eat the carbs and they're not around your training, or you didn't train that day, and then you're just sitting around groggy all day, which is what I'm experiencing now because I was so overreached and overtrained.
Right.
So taking into consideration that you were training so hard for so long, no carbohydrates, no soreness, you were pretty sharp because you had adjusted, you were using ketones mostly. We didn't want to just bum rush you with, like I said, again, 500 grams of carbs or something crazy like that, even though I knew you could technically handle that. At your body weight, for you massing, putting on a pound a week, with where I had your fats, that probably would have been a fine amount of carbohydrate.
A pound a week?
Yeah, a pound a week's a lot for this little chap. That's I don't know what it is, ratio his body weight. But yeah, it sounds like a lot.
It's a lot. And it's going to be body fat. They're trying to get him to put on body fat, which is fine, but you don't need to eat all of those carbs to do that. Is he truly eating 500 grams of carbs?
That's a lot. I used to eat 1,000 grams of carbs for months and months on end, but I built up to that. I don't know how long he's been transitioning now from a sensible diet to a really shit diet. But 500 grams of carbs for a guy of that sort of size is insane.
It's too much. I think he's only 5'2", and he doesn't need all of those carbs. I mean, he could have still stuck in the low carb range and just gone up to 150 or even 200. But 500, that's excessive, and he's overworking his pancreas at that point. And over time, that's going to cause issues.
Not only that, but the Randall cycle activation as well. So.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally for everyone in the world, you want to pick one energy substrate and just run off that.
Correct.
You don't become metabolically flexible by eating fat and carbs. You want the one which is the most nutrient dense. That can be the one with the fat, the lowest deuterium, the most ketotic, if that makes sense. The least amount of blood sugar spikes and crashes.
Yeah, but you want to eat, you're either a sugar burner or a fat burner. But even that being said, he's still, his pancreas is getting overworked with that level of sugar entering the bloodstream every single day. It's going to cause issues down the line.
Yeah, for sure.
We weren't aware of where your mind was quite yet with body image as well. And that was another thing as a coach that I had to take into consideration. So we had that conversation slightly after. I was like, hey, I'm going to...
Bodybuilder talks to young gentleman about body image. It's the biggest contradiction ever.
Who's definitely not on any sort of medications or anything.
Creatine or protein powders.
Right.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Increase your carbs slowly. And I was like, how is you like being this young person coming up in the industry and always having to be sharp and lean for social media? What is your mind like around your body? So you were kind of like, I'm really honestly cool with whatever happens. Right. It's like, okay, cool. So we're going to go to like 275. We'll see how you feel. Because since you have been lean and everything, just 75 for what? Carbs. Since you had been lean for so long, maybe you still didn't really know. Like if I would have just went to 500, you did gain that like 5 pounds of water. You weren't as sharp in pictures and stuff. Maybe you would have had some kind of like, oh shit, maybe I do give a fuck.
Course.
Yeah. So I just still didn't want to do it. And we just kind of increased slowly. And I think that was, it definitely helped quite a bit. And you're just like full as hell and lean still. So now we're going to really push hard.
Going into my current nutrition, obviously we've adjusted to doing that pre, intra, and post training food or nutrition in general. That's one of the major changes that I've had is I've gone.
What do you think about pre, intra, and post training food consumption?
You're talking that anabolic window. If you don't eat protein within 30 minutes, or you're gonna lose all your gains, bro. I mean, if you eat within a couple hours, you're fine. You're not gonna ruin your gains. You don't have to like rush home and pound a protein shake 30 minutes to an hour after you work out. Literally, it doesn't happen that fast. Yeah, you do want to get something in within a couple hours, but there's not this super strict tight window like a lot of these bodybuilders put out there in the world that you have to bring a protein bar and pound a drink on your drive home. That's not the case. It doesn't happen that fast.
Yeah, the reality is, I think you just have to eat enough protein in a given day. You can't reinvent the wheel on that one. Yeah, like me, for example, I eat breakfast about maybe 8 o'clock. Work out maybe 9, 10 o'clock, depends on what I'm doing all day. Lunch maybe 2 o'clock, dinner 6, 7 o'clock. So, my anabolic window is apparently 3-4 hours long.
Yeah.
And I don't seem to be deficient in muscle mass or depleted or having any ill effects. So, and now what's funny about this, right, Nicole, is he's talking about like pre, intra, and post. So the whole fucking works here, all three.
Yeah, a lot of them take these carby drinks intra workout too. They'll have like a carb supplement or a carb drink, and they'll pound that during their workout too. They just take all these supplements. They'll pound a protein shake or a pre-workout on the way to the gym. They'll drink something in the middle of the workout, and then they'll pound something on the way home to maintain those gains. So yeah, it's a lot of these influencers. That's what they promote.
Yeah, they sell a lot of this crap, and I don't really believe in any of it. I think there's some useful supplements. Like sometimes if you're really out of it, you can have some caffeine, taurine, citrulline, maybe a few things like that. But you're not going to be having a carb pre-workout and think that's going to fuel my workouts. It's just going to impair your digestion, which is going to take blood away from your muscles where you're actually training. So
right, and you're running off adrenaline, not anything else really.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's counterproductive, all these things. I'm not big on these sort of intra stuff.
From 3 meals a day to upwards of 6, technically, or 5 with an intra shake. What would you say are the primary benefits to having that pre-intra post-workout nutrition, and what is the level of that effect? Is it great? Is it minimal?
So generally...
God, that was a big pause, wasn't it?
You saw that? You saw his eyes flicker too?
Yeah, you notice this way Mike Israetel, he positions himself, is sat quite far back in his chair, tried to relax, and he ponders the thoughts because he realises he doesn't know dick about fuck when it comes to the carnivore diet. You can see it.
Yeah.
And they try to say things in a correct kind of way, but like we've seen throughout this video now, it doesn't really make much sense. When you put it all together, it doesn't make sense.
No, kind of like the guy with the turd on his head when he was just like not answering the question, just saying a lot of words and just not making any sense. I was like, what are you even talking about? But yeah, I can't wait to see what he says, if there's any benefits to pounding stuff before, during, and after.
Yeah, to his kind of point, I mean, to his point, he is like pre-contest before a bodybuilding competition, so he's probably a bit tired, but I just had to point out that like blatant massive pause, which is a bit, a bit daunting.
Yeah.
If you have a high degree of round-the-clock carbohydrate consumption, your glycogen stores in your muscles stay fuller than if you have low or no carbohydrate consumption. There is a mechanism.
There's no evidence to support that claim. It will not stand up in court.
Right.
The evidence we do have is quite contrary to that. If you're a fat-adapted athlete, where you've been on maybe a low-carb or ketogenic diet for a significant period of time, your glycogen will fill up throughout the day as required without any ill effects or stress to the body. It's very normal. Like you said earlier, gluconeogenesis. I don't seem to be lacking fullness or a pump or energy to work out, and I consume like 40 grams of carbs a day through like milk, you know?
Yeah.
So why is this guy having 500 grams a day? How does that work out?
Yeah, they think they need more carbs than they really do, and they don't understand it's not only getting stored in your muscles either. So
yeah, I think they're just looking at the cherry pick studies that they do have. They haven't looked at the work by Stephen Finney and Volek and people like that. You know, long distance endurance athletes don't have this issue. They always talk about, I don't need energy packs when I want to do my marathons because they got 100,000 calories worth of fat on their body to use as energy. Glycogen is a limited substrate, and if you have carbs down your neck all the time, you're just ensuring that you will never become metabolically flexible and fat adapted. So,
and it gets depleted very quickly too. The glycogen stores too. So fat is more sustainable energy. Glycogen is gone depending on what you're doing. It'd be gone in like 30 minutes to an hour and a half, and you're depleted. Then what? Then you have to constantly replenish with gels or whatever. But yeah, it's not sustainable usage of energy. It's not the optimal form if you're an athlete.
Mechanism by which various cellular elements in your body detect glycogen and to use it as a gatekeeping switch for muscle growth. If your glycogen is low, then there are a few systems that basically go, we're not primed for muscle growth. Let's not even activate muscle growth much in response to training, which is one of the reasons why you don't get very sore from training. If your
it is partly true, and I must admit, yeah, if your systemic stress levels are high, then your body's not going to be able to say, let's pack on some muscle, my body's stressed to fuck, let's build muscle. It's not going to do that. Because muscle is a metabolically demanding tissue to build. It's only going to build it if it has to build it. Otherwise, it's going to spare energy. If it senses a low level of glycogen, it's going to say, hold on a minute, I'm not going to build this extra 5 pounds of tissue in my arms,
Yeah.
Glycogen is high, no matter when you eat your food, but round the clock, you're eating carbs. Every day you're eating plenty. Your intramuscular store of carbohydrate glycogen is higher. When glycogen is detected by your cells as being high in the muscle, your muscles go, you know what, actually, this looks really good. Let's grow more muscle, and it actually uncorks the process. There's direct. So we know that carbs potentiate muscle. Indirectly,
That's not quite an accurate statement. What do you think
Did
about
he just
that?
say carbs eat? Did he just? Did I hear him correctly? He said carbs eat muscle.
He said carbs potentiate muscle.
Potentially ate muscle.
Potentiate. So potentiate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. What do you think? You're smarter in this particular area.
I think it's a misnomer. I think it's more this on the cellular level. Your glycogen levels potentiate muscle growth. He's using them interchangeably, but there's a difference between stored carbohydrate, which is glycogen through glucose molecules, and of course carbohydrate, which is exogenous. And they're mutually exclusive things. They kind of do the same thing, but you're talking about storage of glucose through different substrates versus an exogenous substrate through carbohydrates. So I think he's correct if he's to say glycogen, but the carbohydrate thing is he's used the wrong word, and I think he's just trying to make it sound the same,
Yeah.
we know that the number of bodybuilders that have ever gotten their biggest on a carnivore diet, I believe, stands at maybe actually 0 or a nominal number. So it's curious how everyone who's enormous eats tons of carbs.
Yeah, but it's bias, isn't it? I mean, the thing about carbs is we can go about this all day. Like, carbs are addictive. Okay, that's going to mean every single high stress athlete is going to be gravitating towards foods which acutely alleviate the high stress symptoms of, being an athlete. People are addicted to carbs. Of course, when you've got a bias of, 99.9% of athletes being carb-based or sugar-based, well, no wonder why the data kind of says that, because that's what everyone does. When you've got a demographic of like me and a few other people, like, Sean Baker and a very select few other people, there's a handful of us. It doesn't really show anything. It doesn't tell the story.
Yeah, but look at the people who are bodybuilders. Look when you get close to so I've never obviously done a contest or whatever, but I watched a lot of YouTube videos and I've seen their diets. As they get closer and they're trying to lean down, what's the first thing that they cut? Their carbs. So that makes zero sense. They use carbs to bulk up, to put on more muscle, and then when they want to cut and lean out and tone up, they cut their carbs. So yeah, I don't know. I think you can get the same effect by being on a carnivore diet too. You don't necessarily need all those carbs. People just use the carbs because it's an easy thing to do to bulk and to put on size.
I mean, a bag of Skittles to eat versus a brick of butter. We give that to a child, What are they going to do? They're going to pick the colourful rainbow sweets. It's obvious. All the colours are bright, all the food's bright, it looks appetizing, it's all uniquely formed the same and perfect, and it's got a special shape and that. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier to get down, and you can eat more of it than if you eat a lot of fat and a lot of protein. So I think that's why a lot of these athletes or bodybuilders gravitate towards those things. It's easier. It's easier to get those foods down.
Mm.
And over the generations, the industry has floated towards the guys who are the biggest.
Insulin usage.
They use insulin to drive even more carbohydrates in. Carbs seem to be a really big deal because they probably have insulin has two effects we know about. One is it has a mild anabolic. So it has a small effect of actually increasing how much muscle you eat. And if you're eating protein and fat, your insulin secretion, the total amount of insulin exposure your cells get, your muscle cells, is very, very low.
That's one of the things that many of the carnivore advocates tout is that, it's low insulin. So it's almost like a deer.
What do you think about that? They're talking about like anabolic hormones and insulin.
Yeah, I wonder if he's talking fast-acting insulin. The first thought I had was all these bodybuilders are dying too, because it's not good long term. That's saying you need those things because your body can't keep up with all the exogenous carbohydrates you're consuming. But yeah, eating proteins and fats produce less of an insulin response because it's also producing less of a blood sugar spike, so it maintains body homeostasis, right? But introducing all those carbs into your body at one time is not good for your body, and that's why you have all these reactions, and they need external help in order to keep up with the sheer amount of carbohydrates they're eating. That's not necessarily a good thing, and that's extra added stress to the body.
Completely true, yeah. The other thing I noticed was the misnomer there. So here's Dr. Mike was saying, insulin is mildly anabolic. Strictly speaking,
is he
that's
talking
not
because
true.
it's known as the growth hormone? So is that what you think he's getting at?
Yeah, I mean, people think that different hormones in the body, whether that be IGF-1, insulin, testosterone, growth hormone, cortisol, they all have like an anabolic or an anti-catabolic action. The thing is, a lot of people make a mistake by defining them as either one. So anabolic means it's going to promote tissue growth. Mm-hmm. Anti-catabolic means it's going to help negate tissue degradation. So growth hormone, for example, it's not an anabolic substance despite being a growth hormone. It's actually anti-catabolic. It just reduces protein and degradation. So it's anti-catabolic. And I think people also think insulin is anabolic, but it's not. It just means that there's less likelihood of anti-catabolic processes from being able to happen within the body. So do you get what I'm saying? It sounds like the same thing, but there's a definition for each one.
Yeah. And I think that's how he was coming at it, was the growth aspect of it.
Ionization of insulin in the carnivore space?
Yes. What I can get to that by itself is super fucking wrong. But, guys in the pro ranks don't use 80 units of insulin a day because it's bad for muscle growth. Right. Opposite. It's a miracle drug for muscle.
It's kind of not really the same thing. So I understand what he's saying. Basically, it allows you to continue to eat more food.
Correct.
To fuel the food train, the carb cycle, the carb hole. That's all it is. It's not. It's just allowing or facilitating that to happen without your glycation happening really fast within your body because it's clearing the blood glucose a bit quicker. That's all
Correct.
It is really. Yeah.
Correct. It's providing the body an assist is essentially what it's doing, an external assist.
How are you doing for time, Nicole?
Oh, I'm good. My 2 o'clock got pushed at 3. So yeah, however long it takes, I'm good. This is interesting.
You got some good endurance as well then. Let's go.
Yeah.
So on the
neat.
one hand, insulin is mildly anabolic. You say, okay, mildly. However, it is powerfully anti-catabolic, which means that all muscle growth results from a daily balance of however much you're growing and however little you're losing. Very easy analogy here. How do you accumulate wealth over time? There's always 2-factor model. How much income you draw, anabolism, and how little you spend, anti-catabolism. Because if you're making that Lamborghini money, as I'm known to make, actually buy a lot of Lamborghinis, which I actually just have 0 of them. You stayed at my house for a few days, no Lamborghinis yet. And then, if you buy a lot of Lambos, you could be making millions and just have nothing to show for it at the end of the day except an insanely depreciating car that sits in your garage. So just the same way, while insulin at normal human amounts naturally secreted from carbs isn't going to drive a ton of muscle growth, it is around the clock going to prevent lots of muscle loss. And it's not like you're primed for muscle loss all the time on a hypercaloric diet, but catabolism is something that happens all the time because tissue turns over. All of your muscles are always a little bit anabolic and a little bit catabolic. They exchange their elements. Your muscles are always being constructed and reconstructed all the time. If you can take the degree of construction and elevate it a little, but you take the degree of destruction of the muscle and you elevate it a lot, or sorry, reduce it a lot, that expands the total window of net muscle growth over time, which means that insulin and carbohydrates together end up growing a substantial amount of muscle. But if the benefits don't end there, there are at least a few more. One is that if you have a high degree of intramuscular glycogen storage, you can just do more reps and more sets and recover better between workouts. Your workload goes up. Your productive ability to train goes up. There's another benefit. It's been shown time and time again now that metabolites, that nasty burn at the end of a set, some of those metabolites like lactate are hypertrophic. Now lactate is a byproduct of glucose metabolism. If you're running on ketones, you don't produce as much lactate, which ultra endurance runners sometimes do a little bit better.
We'll stop it there because he just went over quite a bit. What do you think about lactate in regards to potentiating more muscle growth?
Yeah, that I'm not super smart on, so I'll let you tackle that. I just want to add to this whole thing before he got to that point that the glycogen stores can allow you to go longer in the gym, perform better and lift heavier and all that stuff. But as we both talked about earlier, you only have so much in storage and they deplete rapidly depending on how intensely your workout is. And because of that, if you spend more than an hour and a half in the gym, like I believe Tristyn does, you're going to have, that's where the intra workout drink comes in because you're going to deplete yourself. Whereas if you use something like ketones, a higher fat diet, you can actually go longer, sustain longer without your stores depleting. So I don't agree there. I think he's using this conversation in a biased sort of, he's being very biased here when it comes to carbohydrates because he's missing the point that you only have so much storage. They deplete relatively quickly, especially if you're working out intensely, and you don't get that same effect if you use fat for energy instead of relying on glucose.
Yeah, completely true. Touching on the point of lactate, so when it comes to building muscle, people like me and millions of bodybuilders over the world for decades now have been like, what is the mechanism that builds muscle? Is it mechanical tension? Is it metabolite buildup? Is it just having more protein within the body, like through diet? What is it? Is it having really good sleep? Is it doing high reps, low reps? Everyone's been trying to unpack it for a long period of time.
Yeah, time under tension.
Time under tension. Yeah, the whole lot, honestly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he's trying to angle it from the point that, okay, you have more lactate, more metabolite buildup. Therefore, you have more metabolic stress to the muscle group. Therefore, it's going to be more likely to adapt. But that's just one component of muscle growth. He's missing all the things we've just mentioned, the time and tension, the mechanical load. Like I did the experiment. My time and tension with carbohydrates versus not was between two exercises, so leg extension and a leg curl. I believe might get mixed up wrong way around, but it's 10 seconds less for one of them and 15 seconds less for the other ones. So I incorporated carbohydrates to my diet with equated calories, and my repetition time and tension actually went down. So I'm actually, although yes, I'm getting less lactate, more lactate, I'm also getting less time to tension and time to load. So for him to be able to substantiate that claim, he'd have to prove cause and effect that one was more important than the other, which he hasn't done and no one has ever done. So,
yeah,
it's myopic, it's reductionist, it's like shit, basically.
I think, like I said, I think he's being very biased here.
Yeah, that's the carbs viewer, though, isn't it? That's what carbs do.
Better than you've got low carb diets, because they don't get the pump and the burn when they're running. Which when you're running is a fucking disaster. You want to avoid that completely in an ultra run. You're running 100 miles, it better feel like walking the whole time. If you get a ton of carbs in, you may, untrained, if you're not used to them, you may get like quad pump after 15 miles and you're like, this is bad news. Yeah. But that same quad pump that results from a ton of metabolites being generated from those carbs being broken down, that actually in part causes the muscle growth response. So not only are you able to lift bigger weights to impose more tension in any one rep, you're able to do more reps and more sets, which imposes more volume, which is hugely hypertrophic. And also those carbohydrates are burned and metabolites result, and those metabolites like lactate themselves also stimulate anabolism. Just a many compartment, many factor model to boost. Every one of those is just a little bit more muscle. But that shit adds up over time.
For years.
So, oh yeah. Another thing is carbohydrates are the preferred fuel of the nervous system, specifically glucose. And
what do you reckon?
I hate that because that's what I was trained into, and I'm sure you were trained too. It's not we're born as fat burners. When we are born, we're born in a ketogenic state. We're not sugar burners when we're born. Our natural state is our preferred fuel source is fat. That is our preferred fuel source. If our preferred fuel source was glucose from carbs, we would be born as sugar burners, but we're not. We're born in a ketogenic state. The problem is we use glucose first as energy. And because we're so high carb, in the United States and around the world, that is why it's been known as preferred, because that's just what we use first, because we eat so many damn carbohydrates. But it's not true. Our preferred fuel source is fat. We are born naturally in a ketogenic fat burning state. So I hate that because that's how we're all trained, but that's not true. That's a big misconception that I wish would just die.
Yeah. Adding to that point, you said about the babies being in a ketotic state for the majority of their time as a midget people. Yeah, they're trying to chill out for a bit, they're trying to relax.
They're a wee lad, yeah.
They're trying to maximize growth. They're trying to build an entire body.
Exactly.
Their body is a human body is very clever. People think that it's just, it does this thing just because, we've adapted over, hundreds of thousands of years to get to this point. Our default state, like you said, is a high fat, ketogenic fat burning state.
Yeah.
That's going to be the least stressful state to be in. It's our
Correct.
default state because in times of famine, what do we go to? Fat. So we can still, survive and persist.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of get his arguments. You get the rationale behind his arguments, but it doesn't hold true to what we see in reality. It doesn't hold true to what we see in nature. So
Yeah, he's makes good arguments, but it's very, like I said, it's very one-sided. If he were more subjective and given both sides, that would make more sense. But he's being very biased in his arguments, discounting this whole other side. So that's why, to me, these arguments or his description of these things just don't make sense to me, because it's just very biased towards carbs.
yeah.
When you have a high degree of glucose available, you can train harder. So if you have specifically pre-workout carbohydrates.
Is that glucose or glycogen? He's making that same point again.
Yeah.
You have to define the difference.
I think he's confused.
Poor Mike's confused. That might be the thumbnail. Dr. Mike is confused.
And put the little turd hair on Mike's head.
That's it, yeah.
And you have a nice level of glucose in your bloodstream when you go on a train, bro, like, you can fucking go harder psychologically. If your workouts take longer and you have an intra-workout carb shake, and endurance athletes swear by this, you can continue to finish out the workouts better. If you don't have a shake in your workouts, you'll have great workouts. But you'll have slightly better end of the workout if you have a workout shake. And then post-workout, your muscles are super sensitive to carbohydrates and their uptake, which can slam more glycogen in, which leads to that glycogen causing an opening up of muscle growth response. And that means that post-workout, it's really critical to have that. Also, post-workout, you have an increase in muscle breakdown. It's not a terrible thing, but...
Just touching that point about like getting a quick, glucose source into muscle glycogen post-workout. It's like they're trying to... Everything at bodybuilders nowadays, and I say this admittedly because I've been like this in the past, it's never about just doing what's needed as required by the body. It's always about nuking the fuck out of it. Like, what can we do as quickly as possible to do this as quickly as... why do you need to all of a sudden replenish glycogen after a workout? Are you doing 2 workouts back to back? Like, what's the point?
Right.
I don't see the benefit. It just happens faster, but there's no indication of why that is in any way useful for a bodybuilder that's training, say, once a day, maybe 4 times, 5 times a week.
Yeah, I think a good follow-up discussion, and maybe this could be a part 2, is I'm curious because he said you work out harder, you're stronger, and you have better workouts eating a high carb diet. So I would be curious, with your experience, if you find that true, being a carb burner and now being a fat burner, what your experience is. So I think that would be an interesting follow-on conversation we have on that particular topic, because I actually hear that a lot from people. So I would be curious what your experience is.
We can do that, yeah. I've got a lot of data to back up what I say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know, like, I track everything. I'm a crazy, psycho, sadistic, masochistic bodybuilder that tracks everything needlessly. So yeah, fortunately I have all this data so I can substantiate my claims. So we'll do that at some point.
Yeah.
But over time, it will cost you some potential gains. A protein plus carbohydrate shake or kids cereal or whatever, a few apples, whatever you eat, that level of protein is always going to be there because carnivores plenty of protein.
It's always a cereal nowadays, guys. If it's not like cream of rice, it's always like Lucky Charms or Captain Crunch or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Frosties, the lot, kids food.
But the added carbohydrate is so anti-catabolic that it prevents needless post-workout muscle loss. Because post-workout, you'll get lots of gain, but also a little bit of loss. This will keep the gain a little bit higher, but really reduce the loss, making the whole equation just broader.
Well, to substantiate that claim exactly, you'd have to prove that there was a net muscle loss as a result of workout after the fact of doing the workout. So how are you going to measure that? How are you going to tear apart a bicep and say, okay, Jonathan, you lost, 1 millimeter of muscle this time. Then you lost 1 millimeter of muscle after the workout in that, anabolic window. How are you going to work that one out?
Hasn't that been debunked anyway? Hasn't that those claims have been unsubstantiated anyway in the quote unquote literature? I thought.
I think so. There could be. I mean, I've never looked at it because I've never experienced it. I mean, things people always ask me about different studies, this and never. I'm like, well, if I've not experienced it or don't have anything contrary to what I already believe in, I don't bother looking it up.
Yeah.
If there are enough anecdotes that I've heard don't say otherwise, what's the point? But yeah, I'm sure there are studies for sure.
Or for more muscle gain. Those workout window elements, if you're full of glycogen, aren't a big deal. So if you're consuming 600 grams of carbs a day, but not a lot in your workout window, you'll still get amazing results. But especially if you're not consuming lots of carbs, that workout window becomes the most critical part of the workout.
See?
And if you want just a few percentage points more, that's a big deal. And to that percentage point gains thing, I'll say this. Almost all the studies on how nutrition affects gains are conducted on beginners. They are so prone to growth because they're fucking new that they max all their system throughput out completely in most cases. And it's actually very difficult to detect differences in training. I'll go so far as to say this. There is a lit review on this. In the first 3 weeks of training, cardio for new people and lifting causes a roughly same amount of muscle. But think about when you first start doing cardio, running or cycling, you're fucking sore all the time. You get pumps from it. Not an accident. So when we're testing carbs versus low carbs in those people, well, fuck, they grow muscle anyway. But you've been training since you were 13 years old. After age 18 or so, those small differences between carbs and no carbs can for you mean 50% muscle gain differences.
That's the biggest difference I noticed.
Right, it's huge.
Yeah. So in the few weeks or month, whatever it is that he's been doing this diet, Nicole, he said he's noticed a big difference, and perhaps 50%. That's what he's inferring. How are you going to measure that?
I don't know. I think a lot of it is he's putting on weight. He's putting on
weight,
body
for the sake
weight.
of weight.
Just weight. Yeah, he's not putting on fat, or he's putting on fat. So he's just putting on weight. So of course, the more weight you have, mostly you can perform better lift, like strength wise, in the gym. But that's all he's experiencing right now. It's not necessarily a good thing over time, though.
And here he's got 2 coaches. I believe they're both well qualified in like exercise performance. So
Yes.
if he's been having them help him with that, well, he's going to be able to train better anyway. So there's too many variables to sort of underpin. Yeah, it's the extra 500-600 grams of carbs been eating.
Yeah, for sure. They're probably dialing in technique. They're probably dialing in his splits, and yeah, it's more than just diet. But I don't think you can attribute that to carbs 100%. Like I said, like we both said, he's putting on weight, and it's not necessarily good weight.
Yeah,
because you're working at really fine margins. It's like if you have 2 airplanes, if you see a fighter jet fly by and it's flying at 1,800 miles an hour, let's do something more realistic, have a fucking military, 1,200 miles an hour. And you're like, whoa, that's so fast. You see another one fly by at 1,400 miles an hour. You're like, oh, that's so fast. And someone's like, well, which one's better? You're like, they're both so fast. Who cares? Like, yeah, compared to a tank or a person. But 200 miles an hour extra for the faster fighter jet is all the difference to win 90% of dogfights, because it can circle around fast.
that's almost like one of these old school like muscle tech, like fat burner ads, like growth hormone secretagogue ads, like, oh, get 6,000% more this or 200% more gains. Or, it's not equated, is it? Obviously.
I used to take that crap.
yeah, a lot of us did. Honestly, Nicole, you're not 1 in a million there, I don't think. So we've all fallen short to our intellect at times.
Faster, shoot its missiles, and you're like, if the one plane is going 1,200 miles an hour, the other plane's going 1,400 miles an hour, it's a fight between something that effectively is going standing still and 200 miles.
Right.
If you were in a fight against a Lamborghini with a 50 cal on it, and you're standing there with a 50 cal, it can go 200 miles an hour, you're going to die. It's going to circle around you and find you, bad news. So even though both are really fast in absolute terms, that small difference, and it is small, makes a huge difference. If you're an athlete pushing themselves to the maximum, differences in carbs versus no carbs in an untrained population in the studies could be 5% muscle growth. For you, that's 50% muscle growth, or 80% muscle growth, or I no longer detect any muscle growth versus, oh my God, I'm growing muscle for the first time in a year.
That was the biggest difference that I noticed. Was I had progressed for almost 5 years of training, 13 to 18, about using a low carb, ketogenic, and carnivore, eventually carnivore approach. After I hit 18 years old, I noticed this plateau where my strength was stagnant. My muscle building was not progressing as much as I'd like it to.
I'm sure what plays into that as well is being like 6% body fat for God knows how long. That's probably going to tank your testosterone levels. So I wonder why
100%.
you know.
Yeah, 100%. And why does he want to speed it up? He was, yeah, like you said, he's super lean, which is stressful on the body, being that low body percentage. And once you reach closer to your potential, your genetic limit, then of course it's going to be slower. But yeah, I don't know why people think they have to continue to progress at a certain rate. You just let your body do what it naturally does. Why do you have to push it beyond what it is capable or naturally able to do? I never understood that.
Yeah, I'd be getting out as fat-free mass index if I could work it out, and from there you can kind of work out, yeah, you've got a bit left in the tank to build muscle, or no, you don't. I mean, I know people that just genetically aren't meant to build huge amounts of muscle.
Exactly.
They just aren't. So these
Right.
things aren't on what do you call it? That it match. Like I got my fat-free mass index to about, I want to say about 25 or 26 drug-free. So like an elite bodybuilding level, drug-free. I have genetics to hold a lot of muscle mass. Now, some people just don't. You know, Sophie, my partner, she's the same as me. She can hold a lot of muscle mass. She has more muscle mass on her body than most people have as their total body weight.
Yeah.
You know, it's so individual, so genetic. So, you know, he might do this and might find no benefit at all down the line. So, interesting to see.